It was a Tuesday morning, and I was going through some quarterly reports for my hospitality empire when the call came. Isabella Martinez, my sister Sophia's wedding planner, had that tone in her voice. You know, the one that always signals bad news. She told me there was an unexpected $50,000 charge for the Grand View Estate wedding. Apparently, it was for some premium lighting and extra security. I sat my coffee down, looked out at the bustling city below my penthouse, and just said, 50,000 seems steep. Have you spoken directly with the owner? The tone of her response told me everything I needed to know. I wasn't just any quiet little sister. And trust me, this was only the beginning. After that phone call with Isabella, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. It just didn't add up. I mean, $50,000 for lighting and security. It felt like she was trying to take advantage of my sister's wedding. So I decided to dig a little deeper. I dialed Marcus Reynolds, my head of operations, the guy who ran the day-to-day operations for all my properties. I trusted him, and he always got to the heart of things quickly. Marcus, I need you to look into something for me, I said, leaning back in my chair. Apparently, Isabella is claiming we're demanding an extra $50,000 for this weekend's wedding. Can you find out what's going on? I heard Marcus' voice on the other end, a little confused but steady. I'll look into it right away. Miss Thompson, I'll get back to you. I could feel the tension creeping in. This wasn't just about a wedding. It wasn't just a small charge here or there. This was about someone trying to manipulate the system, trying to manipulate me, and I wasn't going to let it happen. About 20 minutes later, Marcus called me back. Miss Thompson, he said, I've spoken with the Grandview Estate Management team. They told me they haven't made any changes to the wedding charges. There's been no mention of any additional fees. But when I asked about Isabella, they said they had a strange interaction with her this morning. What kind of interaction? I asked, my heart rate picking up a bit. Apparently, she was pushing the staff pretty hard. She was claiming that your family couldn't afford the upcharges, and that we should just add them to the bill and let the family pay it, since they'd probably be desperate enough to cover it. She even made some comments about the bride being out of her depth and not knowing how to negotiate with people like us. I felt my blood boil. The nerve of this woman. She didn't know who she was dealing with. Did she actually say that word for word? I asked, already grabbing my notes and preparing for what was coming next. Yes, Miss Thompson. I'm sorry to tell you, but it seems like she was trying to leverage your family's situation for her own gain. I thought you should know. I sat back in my chair, the pieces starting to fall into place. Isabella had underestimated my family, thought we were some naive, out-of-touch group of people who would just roll over and pay whatever she demanded. She didn't know that I was always 5 steps ahead of her. I wasn't about to let her get away with this. Listen, Marcus, I said, I need you to do something for me. Call Isabella back and tell her we're implementing our premium conflict resolution protocol. Marcus chuckled a little at that. What protocol would that be, Miss Thompson? Oh, I said, a smile creeping onto my face. It's the one where we require all additional charges to be approved directly by the ownership group. Tell her that the owner will be attending personally. Have her meet me at the estate at 2 p.m. this afternoon. There was a pause on the other end. Understood, Miss Thompson. I'll make the call. The idea of Isabella's face when she realized she had been talking to the very owner of the estate, it was going to be priceless. And maybe, just maybe, this would be the lesson she needed to learn. After I hung up with Marcus, I called my sister. I knew she was probably freaking out about the whole situation. Her wedding was in 4 days, and now Isabella was throwing this curveball at her. I could hear the tension in Sophia's voice as soon as she picked up. Emma, thank God, she said, her voice shaking. Isabella just called me freaking out about some extra costs. She says we need $50,000 more or they'll cancel the wedding. What do we do? Mom and Dad already think we're overspending, and David's parents are saying we're being financially irresponsible. I felt my heart ache hearing the worry in her voice. She'd been planning this wedding for 18 months, working double shifts at her marketing job, trying to save every penny. She didn't deserve this. Our parents already thought the Grandview estate was beyond our reach. They didn't understand why she was willing to go all in for something so extravagant. Sophia, I said, trying to calm her down. Don't worry, I've got it handled. Emma, you don't understand, she interrupted, her voice growing more frantic. This isn't like when we were kids and you'd give me your allowance money. $50,000 is real money. And Isabella says the owner is some kind of billionaire who doesn't care about small clients like us. I could hear the panic in her voice, but I wasn't about to let Isabella get away with this. I knew Sophia didn't understand the full scope of what was going on, and that was okay. She didn't need to. Trust me, Sophia, your wedding is going to be perfect. I promise. At 1:45 p.m., I pulled up to the Grandview estate in my old Honda. I parked next to Isabella's shiny BMW and what I assumed was Sophia's car. The estate was stunning. A restored 1920s mansion with chandeliers and marble floors. But I didn't care about the opulence. I was here for something much more important. I walked through the grand entrance and found Isabella in the ballroom, talking on her phone. She was pacing, hands moving wildly as she talked, probably trying to figure out how she was going to spin this mess. She looked up when she saw me, and I could tell she wasn't happy to see me. Her expression was the kind of fake politeness that only a person like Isabella could pull off. You must be the sister, she said, her voice dripping with condescension. Listen, honey, we really need to discuss realistic options for your family. This venue might be a bit ambitious. Actually, I said, checking my watch, I'm here for the meeting with the owner. Isabella laughed, the sound sharp and dismissive. Sweetie, that meeting is for serious clients only. Why don't you take your sister and grab some coffee while the adults handle business? Before I could respond, Marcus appeared in the doorway. Ms. Martinez, the owner is ready to see you now. Isabella's face froze, and I could tell she wasn't sure what was going on. But I wasn't done yet, not by a long shot. I could see the shock on Isabella's face as she tried to collect herself. She had clearly underestimated me, dismissed me as just another quiet, modest sister, probably thinking I was in way over my head. She probably thought she could walk all over us, make a quick buck off a family she thought was naive and clueless. But she was about to find out how wrong she was. As Marcus led us down the hallway to the estate's private office, I could feel the tension hanging in the air. Isabella was ahead of me, her designer suit perfectly tailored, her heels clicking sharply on the marble floors. She was trying to act like nothing was wrong, but I could tell she was rattled. She didn't know what was coming. Sophia was trailing behind, still looking nervous, but I could tell she was starting to get a sense that things were about to turn in our favor. We reached the office door, and Marcus opened it with a quick nod. After you, he said, and Isabella walked in first, her face the picture of forced professionalism. The office had been restored to its original 1920s grandeur, with oak furniture, leather-bound books, and a massive antique desk that commanded attention. Isabella took the seat across from the desk, her posture confident and stiff, while Sophia sat beside her, clearly uncomfortable but trying to hold it together. I walked in and, for a moment, just stood there by the door. Isabella was still talking, saying something about how the wedding would be perfect if only we could get the costs under control. But I wasn't listening to her anymore. I was waiting for the moment when she'd realize what I was about to reveal. Finally, I took my seat behind the massive desk. I noticed Isabella's eyes darting toward me as she looked up, clearly confused. She hadn't expected me to sit at the head of the table, especially not behind that desk. Now then, she said, trying to regain her composure. I appreciate you taking the time to meet with us personally. Mr. Actually, Marcus interrupted. I'm not the owner. I'm the operations manager. The owner will be joining us momentarily. Isabella's eyebrows shot up at that, and for a moment, I could see the flicker of uncertainty pass through her. But she recovered quickly, offering a tight smile. All right, well, I suppose the bride should be here, but surely we don't need everyone, she said, clearly trying to play it off. But then Marcus said something that made her stiffen. Actually, Marcus said calmly, the owner specifically requested that all parties involved in Saturday's wedding be present for this discussion. Isabella looked like she was about to protest, but Marcus didn't give her a chance. That includes Miss Emma Thompson, he added, emphasizing my name with a polite but pointed tone. Isabella froze, her smile faltering for a second. She glanced back and forth between Marcus and me, clearly trying to piece together the situation, but she was still playing it cool, still pretending like nothing was wrong. We followed Marcus into the private office, and as we sat down, I could feel the weight of the moment settle in. The next few minutes were going to change everything. As Isabella started talking again, I let her ramble on for a bit. She was still trying to convince us that the wedding had to be perfect and that we simply couldn't afford the costs unless we made some tough decisions. But I wasn't interested in her excuses anymore. I was ready for her to face the truth. Actually, I said, interrupting her mid-sentence, I think we've had enough discussion for now. I'd like to introduce myself. Isabella paused, looking at me with a confused frown. What do you mean? She asked, clearly thrown off guard. I smiled. I'm Emma Thompson, owner and CEO of Prestige Holdings. For a moment, the room was completely silent. Isabella blinked, her mouth opening and closing like a fish. Sophia's eyes went wide, and I could see the realization dawning on her. She was starting to piece it all together. But Isabella, she was still processing. You're the owner, Isabella stammered, her voice incredulous. I nodded, leaning back in my chair, enjoying the moment just a little too much. Yes, I am. And I believe we spoke on the phone this morning. Isabella's face cycled through several shades of red as she sputtered, trying to find something to say, some excuse, some way to explain herself. But there was nothing she could say that would undo the damage she'd done. No, she said finally, her voice shaking. This must be some mistake. You're just the bride's sister. You drive a Honda. You can't possibly own a $2.8 billion hospitality empire. I leaned forward slightly, my smile never wavering. I can and I do, I said simply. Prestige Holdings owns the Grandview Estate, along with the Ocean View Resort in Maine, the Metropolitan Conference Center downtown, and 14 other luxury venues across New England. Isabella's face went even paler. She had no idea. She had no idea who she was really dealing with. I slid a folder across the desk, opening it to reveal the details of the contract we had with her. Now, about this $50,000 charge you mentioned, I said calmly. I've reviewed our contract with Miss Carmichael, and I don't see any provisions for additional lighting or security fees. Isabella's hands trembled as she reached for her tablet, trying to maintain some semblance of control. But I wasn't done yet. I was told by my vendor that... She started, but I interrupted her. Which vendor would that be? I asked, my voice still calm, but with just the faintest edge. The lighting company, she said, her voice cracking. Isabella, I said, cutting her off. I own the lighting company too. Brilliance Event Lighting has been a subsidiary of Prestige Holdings for 2 years. Same with Elite Security Services, and Isabella's eyes widened as she realized what I was saying. So please, I continued, enlighten me about these mysterious additional charges. The room was silent for a moment. The only sound, the ticking of the antique clock on the wall. Isabella's hand shook as she looked down at the paper in front of her, and I could tell she was finally realizing just how deep she was in. I leaned back in my chair, taking a deep breath. The truth is, there are no additional charges. There never were. Sophia's eyes went wide, and I could see her taking in the full scope of what was going on. This wasn't just a misunderstanding. This was Isabella's greed, laid bare, and now it was time for her to pay the price. The silence in the room was suffocating as Isabella's eyes darted from the papers in front of her to my calm, steady gaze. Her face had gone pale, and I could see the color slowly draining from her cheeks. She was realizing that I knew exactly what she'd been up to. But I wasn't finished, not by a long shot. I have recordings. Isabella, I said, my voice unwavering. This estate has been fully wired for security since I bought it. Every conversation, every meeting, every snide comment you've made about my family's so-called limited budget, it's all here. Isabella's face turned even whiter as she started to tremble, her fingers gripping her tablet so tightly I thought it might crack. She tried to open her mouth, but nothing came out at first. Then she stammered, I didn't mean it like that. No, I said, leaning forward, watching her squirm. Then explain this. I slid a printed transcript across the desk, a smug smile playing at the corner of my lips. This is a record of your conversation with Marcus this morning, right here. You suggested that we inflate the wedding bill because, and I quote, desperate families always pay premium prices. You even went as far as to say that these people are clearly desperate to impress. Tell me again, Isabella, how that doesn't sound like an attempt to manipulate us into paying extra fees. I watched her face cycle through several expressions, guilt, disbelief, fear, all in the span of a few seconds. She was a master at pretending to be in control. But now, she was nothing more than a fraud caught in the act. You don't understand, she stammered, shaking her head. I was just trying to make sure everything went smoothly. The family, they needed my expertise. I shook my head, leaning back in my chair. Don't try to justify it. Isabella, your actions speak louder than your words. I've also got an email right here that you sent to your assistant yesterday. I slid another document across the desk. In it, you discuss how to squeeze every penny out of the Thompson wedding because you assumed we wouldn't know any better. You called us unsophisticated and out of our league. And you know what? That's the part that really gets me. Sophia was staring at me, wide-eyed, completely shocked by what she was hearing. Her mouth hung open, as if she couldn't quite believe the words coming out of my mouth. But I wasn't about to stop now. I wasn't going to let Isabella slither out of this. I looked directly at Isabella, my gaze cold and unyielding. You've treated my family like we were beneath you. You thought we were easy targets, didn't you? You thought you could squeeze us dry, manipulate us, and no one would ever know. But now, everyone knows. She was visibly sweating now, her face flushed with panic. Her eyes darted around the room, as if looking for an escape, but there was no way out. She was cornered, and I wasn't letting her off the hook. Isabella, I've had enough of this, you're fired, I said, my voice cutting through the tension like a knife. Effective immediately. She looked like I had slapped her. Her jaw dropped, and for a split second, I thought she might actually cry. You can't do that, Schwallenschatz said, her voice trembling. I have a contract with the bride. You can't just, I cut her off, my voice firm. Actually, according to the contract you signed with my sister, all vendor relationships are subject to venue approval. And as the owner of this estate, I'm exercising my right to remove vendors who don't meet our standards. Her face turned a deep shade of crimson, and I could hear her breath quicken as she tried to come up with anything, to salvage the situation. But there was no salvation for her. She had crossed a line, and there was no going back. I stood up from behind the desk, my gaze never leaving her. Isabella, you've had your run here. You've tried to play games with my family, manipulate us, and take advantage of a situation you thought you could control. But now, you're out. She shot a desperate glance at Sophia, her last attempt to try and win her over. Sophia, please, she pleaded, her voice now cracking. This is your wedding. You can't let her ruin everything we've worked for. I'm the only one who knows how to make this happen. We can fix this. Sophia didn't even flinch. She was no longer the nervous, unsure woman she'd been just an hour ago. She stood up slowly, her voice steady for the first time all afternoon. Everything we've worked for, Isabella. You've spent months making me feel like I was bothering you. You've criticized every decision I've made, treated me like I wasn't good enough for the wedding of my dreams. I never asked for your help to begin with. Isabella's expression faltered for just a moment, and I could see her ego start to crumble. She had been pretending to help, pretending to be the expert, but it was all a lie. Sophia continued, her voice calm but firm. You didn't help me. You were trying to make yourself feel superior. And now I find out you were planning to steal $50,000 from us. I could see the weight of those words settle in on Isabella. Her shoulders slumped and she looked defeated. She opened her mouth to speak, but nothing came out. I nodded to Marcus, who had been standing quietly at the door, waiting for his cue. Marcus, take care of this. He stepped forward, looking down at Isabella with a neutral expression. Ms. Martinez, I'll need your vendor access cards and any estate keys you may have. Isabella's hands were shaking as she fumbled through her purse, desperately trying to gather the materials. She finally handed them over, her fingers trembling as she did. As she walked out of the room, I could hear her muttering under her breath, but I didn't care to listen. She had lost. She had tried to manipulate my family, and now she was paying the price for it. As the door closed behind her, I turned to Sophia, who was looking at me with a mixture of disbelief and gratitude. She didn't know the full extent of what had just transpired, but she would soon. Sophia, I said softly, this wedding is going to happen, and it's going to be perfect. She smiled, her eyes filling with tears. I don't know how to thank you for all of this. I smiled back, my heart swelling with pride. You don't have to thank me. This is what family does for each other. As we left the office, I couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction. Isabella had underestimated me, but in the end, it was my family who had won, and I wasn't about to let anyone take that away from us. As the door clicked shut behind Isabella, I could feel the tension start to lift from the room. For the first time in hours, Sophia looked at me with a mix of awe and disbelief, like she was seeing me for the first time. Her eyes were wide, and I could see the questions swirling in her mind. She opened her mouth to say something, but then closed it again, unsure of where to start. Finally, after a long silence, she asked, Emma, how long have you owned the estate? I smiled softly, leaning against the desk as I considered how to answer. It wasn't something I'd planned on sharing. In fact, I had kept my wealth and my role in the family's business carefully hidden for years. I didn't want anyone to think I was just throwing money around or using my success to prove anything to anyone. But now, as I looked at my sister, my little sister, the one who had always been so proud of her own accomplishments, I knew it was time to tell her the truth. 3 years, I said simply. I bought it the same weekend you and David got engaged. Sophia blinked, her face a mixture of shock and confusion. You bought the estate? But why didn't you tell me? I took a deep breath, trying to find the right words. I didn't want you to choose it because of me, Soph. I wanted you to love it for what it is. Not because I owned it. I didn't want your wedding to become about my money. Her expression softened, but there was still a touch of disbelief in her eyes. But you've been living in that apartment and driving that old Honda. I always thought, I mean, I thought you were struggling. I chuckled lightly, feeling a wave of sadness wash over me. I'm not struggling, Soph. I've been saving and investing since I was 16. I built my company carefully, with every decision being about the long game. I live below my means because that's how I've been able to build what I have. Sophia's eyes were now filled with understanding. But you never talked about your work, never spent money on yourself. You always seemed so quiet about everything. Exactly, I said, my voice quiet now. When you have money, people start treating you differently. Every relationship feels transactional, like people are only interested in you for what you can give them. And I didn't want that. I didn't want our family to see me as the one who could buy them things or solve their problems. She was quiet for a moment, processing what I'd said. I could see the gears turning in her mind as she pieced everything together. I thought you didn't care about any of it, she finally said. I thought you didn't care about being seen. I shook my head. I care about family, Soph. I care about you. But the rest of it, the flashy cars, the big houses, the attention, it's all noise. The people who really matter are the ones who love you for who you are, not for what you can provide. Sophia reached out, touching my hand gently. I had no idea. I never understood why you kept everything so private. I smiled softly. Because this is who I am. Soph, I want you to know that I've always been proud of you. I've always been rooting for you. And I've been helping, just quietly, in the background. But it's not about showing off or making a big spectacle. It's about making sure you're taken care of when it matters. She squeezed my hand, her voice breaking slightly. I don't know how to thank you for all of this. You've been there for me, even when I didn't realize it. You've been supporting me from the shadows, and I didn't even know. I shook my head, pulling her into a hug. You don't need to thank me, Soph. This is what family does for each other. No strings attached. For the first time that day, Sophia smiled with complete ease. I guess I've been thinking about success all wrong. I pulled back slightly, looking her in the eyes. What do you mean? All this time, I thought success was about what we could show the world, how big the wedding was, how much we spent. But now I see it's about love. It's about the people who support you, no matter what. Her words hit me harder than I expected. In that moment, I realized she had truly understood the lesson I'd been trying to teach all along. Success wasn't about the car you drove, the dress you wore, or how many zeros were in your bank account. It was about the people who mattered, the ones who were there for you through thick and thin. As we stood there, just the two of us, I felt a sense of peace settle in. The wedding was going to be perfect, not because of the venue, the food, or the decorations, but because it was going to be a celebration of love. My family's love for each other, for me, and for Sophia's new life with David. Success isn't about impressing people, I said softly. It's about making sure the people you love feel loved and supported. Sophia smiled at me, a real smile this time, one that reached her eyes. I get it now, and I'm so glad you're here. Thank you for everything. And in that moment, I knew that no matter what happened next, my sister and I had deepened our bond in a way that would last forever. We weren't just family anymore. We were partners in this crazy thing called life. And nothing, no amount of money or status could ever change that. The day of the wedding arrived, and it was perfect. The kind of perfect you only get when everything comes together just as it's supposed to. The sun was shining, the gardens were in full bloom, and everything from the flowers to the table settings was exactly how Sophia had imagined it. I stood off to the side, watching it all unfold. It was easy to get caught up in the beauty of the day, but I couldn't help but feel a quiet sense of satisfaction as deep inside, this was everything Sophia had dreamed of, and I'd made sure it all went smoothly. Without her ever needing to worry, Isabella was nowhere to be seen. The new wedding planner, Carmen, took control effortlessly, ensuring every guest felt cared for, every detail was in place. The staff moved gracefully around the estate, orchestrating the event as if it had always been part of the plan. No drama, no hiccups, just elegance and joy. Sophia looked radiant as she walked down the aisle toward David. She was glowing. And in that moment, I knew all the sacrifices, all the quiet support I'd given her over the years had been worth it. The wedding was about her, the woman she had become, the life she was about to build with the man she loved. I watched the two of them exchange vows, my heart swelling with pride. I knew this day wasn't just important for her and David. It was important for all of us, our family, our history, our bond. And I was proud of every step that had led to this moment. I had quietly played my part, not looking for recognition, but knowing it would all come together exactly as it should. Later, during the reception, I found myself standing on the terrace, watching the guests dance and laugh. The night air was cool, and I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of everything settle over me. It was all coming together in a way I'd never imagined. My parents, relaxed for the first time in weeks, were sitting at a table with David's family, chatting happily. They didn't know the half of it, of course, but they didn't need to. This day was for them too, my parents, who had always looked at me as the quiet one, the one who never drew attention to herself. I had never needed them to understand. But as I watched them enjoy the night, I felt a quiet sense of gratitude toward them. They had shaped me into the woman I was today. Sophia found me later in the evening. She walked up, a glass of champagne in her hand and a smile on her face. "Emma," she said softly, "I just wanted to thank you. I know you've always been there for me, but today, seeing everything come together like this, I can't even explain how much it means to me." I pulled her into a hug, feeling the weight of the day's emotions flooding through me. "You don't have to thank me," I said. "This is your day. Sophia, you deserve this. You deserve everything." She pulled back, her eyes sparkling with tears. "I don't know what I would have done without you. You've been my silent strength through all of this." I smiled, the words catching in my throat. That's what family does for each other. The night went on, and the wedding became a memory we would all cherish forever. But as I stood there, quietly watching my family, I realized something. I didn't need anyone to know what I had accomplished. I didn't need to broadcast my success or show off the life I had built. What mattered was the love and support I gave to the people who mattered most to me. As I made my way to my car at the end of the night, I found myself reflecting on everything, the quiet choices, the decisions made in solitude, the sacrifices made to keep things simple and unassuming. I had built an empire, but I had done it quietly. I lived my life without the need for attention or validation. The world could keep its flashy displays and its need for recognition. I was content to live behind the scenes, where my success wasn't about showing off, but about supporting the people I loved. As I drove home in my old Honda, I smiled to myself. It wasn't about the car I drove or the apartment I lived in. It was about the life I'd built and the quiet, unspoken way I'd made sure my family always knew they were loved and taken care of. That was my success. That was enough. As I sat in the quiet of my apartment, the city lights twinkling outside my window, I couldn't help but reflect on everything that had unfolded. The wedding was over, and it had been perfect, everything Sophia had dreamed of. But the true victory wasn't just in the success of the day, it was in the journey that had led me here, in the quiet, steady steps I had taken to build something real, something meaningful. I had always chosen the path of humility, never seeking to flaunt my success or wealth. It wasn't about proving something to anyone. It was about making sure the people I loved felt supported, no matter what. Whether it was Sophia's wedding or the way I had built my empire in the shadows, I had always found peace in keeping my life simple. In a world that often demands you to show your success, I had chosen to be invisible, not because I wanted to hide, but because I wanted my actions to speak louder than any flashy display ever could. I leaned back in my chair, thinking about how much I had grown, not just professionally, but personally. Life had a funny way of teaching you lessons when you least expected it. I had learned that success wasn't about how much you could accumulate or how loud you could make your presence known. It was about finding balance, staying true to yourself, and making sure that the people you loved always felt valued. And as I looked out at the city, the one that had once seemed so overwhelming, I knew there was still so much more to do. My journey wasn't over, it was just beginning. I had built something I was proud of, but I wasn't done yet. There were still challenges to face, still dreams to chase, and still people to support. So, I smiled to myself and took a deep breath. Success, after all, wasn't about what you had, it was about who you were and who you lifted up along the way. I had learned to appreciate the quiet achievers in my life, the ones who work behind the scenes, the ones who don't need to be seen to make a difference. And I was content, knowing that I was one of them. As I reached for my phone, a message from Sophia popped up. "Thank you for everything. I love you." And with that, I felt a quiet sense of pride. I had done what I set out to do. I had helped make her dreams come true. And that, I realized, was the greatest success of all.